Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. Eric, you're spot on with the bumper music today. I like it. Hey, it's good to have you with us. We're broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you by Extreme Exteriors and American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency. We've got an amazing story that's coming out of the city of Atlanta. But before we get to that, we have received this last week, Tony, a question on our hotline from a listener. But before we have Eric play that, why don't you tell our listeners how they can get a question answered on the show as well?
Well, call us anytime you have an idea for a topic of discussion, anytime you have an opinion about something we've been talking about, or you have a question. Call our hotline at 952-224-2668. You can leave a message for us. You can leave your name and number or not. We like to play those on the air on our show, so let us know if you don't want it aired. But we can omit your name and contact information or association information if you want, but we love to hear your voice on our radio show. So record your question, 952-224-2668.
And we have someone who did that this last week. Eric, go ahead.
Hello, I live in a cooperative, and we have a situation where we have several units for sale, and the people who own the units would like to rent them. It has been our policy that people cannot rent their units, but it's coming to a point where they've had them for sale for quite some time, and we think maybe that would be our best option. Can you give some ideas of what we should have, what we should include in a policy about renting cooperative units? Thanks very much.
Boy, that's a great question, isn't it? And it's one that's coming up more and more often. I want to respond, but first I need to say that cooperatives and homeowner associations are two different legal organizations in the state of Minnesota, and they differ in many ways.
Many similarities, but differences as well.
That's right. The very first step you have to take when you're considering changing a policy or amending rules is to check your documents. Now, in a co-op, your governing document is called the bylaws, and you need to check those and your rules and regulations to see what it says about rentals. You cannot violate your documents. Or if you can change your documents, you need to look for the process. What's the correct process to change them?
When you say for people to take a look at their governing documents, Tony, there is a reason, because depending on where it is could determine whether or not they already have the authority to make that change by the board of directors versus having to actually change the governing documents itself, right?
With a co-op, the bylaws, what I have learned is that almost everything has to be decided by a majority of all members. So check those bylaws. In a homeowners association, you're going to be looking at your declaration of covenants and restrictions. If it already says that rentals are allowed, well, there you go. You're just ready to start writing some policy and some rules about it. Check those documents first. There's many good reasons for communities to allow rentals in the neighborhood. Some of those are, it's been found that rentals do not lower property values. In fact, there's a good argument to be made in this market that it will help sales and help increase property values. A lot of people are learning now that they don't want to buy a home in a community that bans rentals because they may get stuck in a situation where they can't stay there, they have to move, and they can't sell.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty we've been in for
that's right.
Another 4 or 5 years now, anyway.
And that's what our caller described in her co-op. They can't sell, or they don't want to sell right now, but they can't afford 2 payments. So vacant units in your community are not paying their monthly rent or their monthly assessments, so you're losing that money, and damages can occur in that unit and neighboring units. We've had pipes freeze and break in a townhouse that then vacant townhouse then flooded neighboring townhouses.
I think that's a great point, Tony, that a vacant unit can cause a lot more damage to the unit. Because, for example,
to the property, then that's right.
For example, folks, if this unit that was vacant's on the 3rd floor, and on the 4th floor there's a water leak, but nobody on the 3rd floor knows it because they're vacant.
Good point.
It is going to do a lot more damage to the second and first floor, but not until it has soaked up
That's
the
right.
wood and done so much other damage, and it could have been prevented earlier on if there was someone there.
You're better off with a resident there.
Exactly.
While poorly managed rental units can cause problems for neighbors, it's more often badly behaved owners that are causing community problems. A renter can be evicted. An owner cannot. It's another good reason. Renters can be managed and controlled by requiring good management practices. You can garnish the rent from a delinquent owner. If an owner is renting a unit and not paying their assessments, it's very easy for you to identify income, go to small claims court, get a judgment, and start garnishing that rent.
What a great idea.
What could be simpler?
And it's a lot easier than, or a lot less expensive than necessarily going with an attorney and trying to foreclose.
Well, the hardest part about a garnishment is figuring out where the money is. So you save yourself the trouble of trying to find bank accounts or jobs or that kind of thing. Also, if the homeowners association forecloses on the home for delinquent dues, then they can take over the rental of that unit, or they can rent the unit out themselves, collect that rent to recoup those losses.
Man, that has been a lifesaver for a number of our clients who have had an outstanding amount of $4,000 or $5,000, and then by the time that the bank finally forecloses and takes control, that outstanding amount might be zero.
That's
it
right.
might, or just a few $100s.
The association can foreclose before the bank, and they can take possession before the bank forecloses. So those are good reasons to allow rentals. Here's some suggestions for good rental policy. Verify that the owner of the unit has obtained a rental license, if necessary, from your city. Require that the landlord use a written lease. And also use an addendum to the lease that protects the homeowners association or the co-op. And that addendum should include things like verifies that the renter received your rules and regulations, verifies that the renter signs off that he understands them and will abide by them. The addendum should assert that any violation of the community rules is a violation of the lease and could result in eviction. And also says that if there's any conflict between the lease and the community rules prevail.
Yeah.
Right? And I've got examples of this.
Yeah, and there's also the example of requiring contact information, so you know.
Well, that's next on my list.
Oh,
Required names.
I spoke too soon.
Require names and phone numbers of all the adults in the household, and also get names and ages of all the children. You need to know who these folks are. If you find a lost child in the hallway or in the yard, it would be nice to be able to figure out who they belong to.
That's right.
You should require a local contact for emergencies or urgent concerns. No absentee management. It is not okay for this person to rent out their unit and then move to California and you never hear from them again. All right? So require that. Require inspections regularly. Require professional management. Consider that. I don't know that anyone's done that, but you might do that. When there's a problem with a unit that violates city ordinance, contact the police. Don't just keep contacting your board of directors over noise issues or loose animals or damage to the exterior of the unit. Call the police and the city inspectors. That's what they're there for. Check on these registrations every year to make sure they're in compliance. Make sure you tell the landlord he's responsible or she for all the activity on that property, and that if there's a problem with the renter, he's going to be fined. He's going to be held responsible. One more thing is when you're sending out notices to all your owners, let's say that the driveways are going to be seal coated or the hallway carpeting is going to be cleaned, send a copy to the rental unit too, because a lot of times landlords forget to pass those messages on to their renters, and then the renter gets in trouble without even knowing that he was headed for trouble.
Those are great suggestions. Now, you have gone to a number of meetings, even with people who aren't our clients, and are willing to do that too.
Yeah, I've consulted on this issue a lot. I have some examples of policies. I have examples of lease addendums. I've got some suggestions for where to find great lease paperwork. So call us, leave us a message on our hotline, 952-224-2668, if you would like me to speak to your board or speak to your co-op, or if you would like examples.
Talk about management of an individual unit, too.
There you go. I almost forgot. Yeah. I manage rental units.
There. But, another thing that I think people can think about, and if you're in an association and you're concerned about setting up or establishing a rule or regulation, and it's going to go on forever. So let's say they've gone through the governing documents. It allows them to do that. You can put at the end of that rule or regulation a sunset provision. A lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah.
You know, you
Good
can say
idea.
that we're not going to do this forever, but we're going to do this now for a period of time, and it's going to be between now and, put it out for 2, 3 years, 4, 5 years, because you know that you're going to be dealing with this for a little bit of time to come.
Sure.
But with the sunset provision, it allows it to end at a specific time, and
Without
now
further action.
And now at that time, you can renew that, or it goes away, and you on the board or you in an association have addressed a problem but have moved on.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I have one more thing. Be sure to confer with your insurance carrier and with your professional management of your community to find out if those costs are going to be affected by allowing rentals.
Yeah. Some good ideas. Thanks for that question. Again, that number to call, 952-224-2668, our hotline. Leave a message anytime, and we will answer it on next week's show. Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got that story out of Atlanta that is really fascinating. What is it? We'll tell you after these messages.
People think I'm cool.